Hello, good afternoon. Sorry, so I just wanted to start by getting a show of hands. Who here is shipping software? Fantastic. And how many of you ship a new release of your software at least once a month? Okay. And does anyone here, hands up if you know what dogfooding is, or if you're familiar with dogfooding? Okay, a few of you, cool. So for those of you that don't know, dogfooding is the process whereby a software company takes that software as they're building it and they deploy it to an internal, generally an employee-only environment that is available for their employees to test as they're building new features. So this actually leverages on something that Joe was talking about around the failing fast or succeeding fast, and also around the continuous deployment. So dogfooding is one of those things that can be in that workflow from taking an idea out to your customers, just to give you internally a bit more confidence and transparency with what the team is working on. So what I wanted to look at today were some reasons for and some approaches to introducing dogfooding for those of you that aren't doing dogfooding today but are delivering software. One of the key things is that you want to get to production as quickly as possible. You want to, as Joe said, you want to get this feature out to your customers as soon as possible. You don't want to hang around and leave it somewhere in source code for 2 months, right? You've got value there. That value isn't actually, well, it's wasted unless it's in the hands of customers. So what we want to do is we want to test our software in as close to production as possible without actually exposing our end users, our customers, to that. Now, there's a couple of different approaches to this, but in the realm with dogfooding, what we'll actually do is we'll have an internal instance of the software that we use, that we only use. So for instance, at Twitter, we have a server that's a staging server. And the branches that Joe was talking about, they will be deployed to one of these staging servers throughout the day. As an engineer completes a feature, it'll go to a staging server. But when you get to the point of a couple of thousand customers, a couple of 100,000 customers, or a few more, you want to be pretty confident that what you're sending out isn't going to have any large-scale impacts. And for that reason, we actually take the time to look at these features in a production-like environment just by the employees. And so every time a Twitter employee hits twitter.com or brings up Twitter on their mobile, it's actually going to this other parallel instance of the site where we can actually test these new features before we roll them out to potentially millions of users. The key thing is that the data is, for all intents and purposes, real data. And one of the key things about that is having real data as opposed to the lorem ipsum, if you're familiar with it. It doesn't really track how your users use the product in the real world. So you want to, if you're dogfooding, you want to test on as close to production, if not a production replica, as close to that as possible. The next thing is quality. You can imagine that there's a lot of back and forth, right? We want to have great quality code, but quite often, this might be familiar to you, where an engineer closes an issue or a feature, and as the product manager, you look at it and you go, well, hang on, it doesn't work for this, and you've missed this edge case. And so what we're actually doing when we're dogfooding, and when we're using this in production-like environment with real data, is we're forcing that quality bar to go up. The engineer can't just quickly hack something together. They've actually got to test their stuff locally. They've got to have those tests that Joe talked about. And indeed, they've got to have a high degree of confidence that what they're actually pushing into master and that's made it through a code review isn't going to have any critical impact. One team I've worked with in the past, dogfooding was actually, there's a plus side and there's a minus side. The plus side is that a data corruption bug didn't get sent out to thousands of customers. The minus side is that the dogfooding server, which was internal, which ran all the company's systems, got completely hosed. So because you're doing this dog fooding on internal systems with with production data, you want to make sure you've got backups. You want to make sure that you can restore and return to a known good state as quickly as possible. And that's got to be fast, because trust me, when you adopt dog fooding for the first time, I'm sure there will be problems that slip through as people get used to a revised quality bar that's even higher. Good news is you're testing stuff before your customers get it. And that's when feedback comes into this. Because we can test this software before our end users get access to it, we can more quickly, or we're more likely to find those edge cases and reach those scenarios in the application or in the software that our end users would ultimately find. And so I like to think of this, the one metric that we actually use to measure this is the captured versus the escaped bugs. So if we capture a bug within our team, within our company, that's one thing, right? The cost is fairly minimal. If it's an escaped bug, if one of our users hits that bug, then you can imagine that the cost is quite high. I mean, fairly standard example, the customer hits the bug. The customer raises a support request. Okay, so there's one of our employees and some of their time to track this down and interact with the customer. The support engineer, sorry, they can recreate the bug, right? And they can say, yes, this is a valid bug. Now they've got to go back to the engineering team and get that bug on the queue to be fixed, hopefully in 45 minutes. But as the scale of an operation grows, that's not always the case. And so the escaped bug has a much larger cost to the product manager and to the organisation as a whole. And so hence, we want to get this feedback fast and get it from internal customers. Side note to this, even around feature feedback, you've been doing your prototypes with customers obviously, but what I've found in the past is that feature feedback in production, in a dog fooding environment, is actually generally more constructive because you've got people that are intimately familiar with the software, even if they're sales, even if they're marketing. They know what they're selling. You'd hope they know what they're selling. But they can give you much better feedback, much more constructive feedback, if they're using it internally as well. This feedback can be really valuable for driving momentum in an engineering team. And so if we take a look at one example of this, we extended this feedback for one team that I was working with. And so we thought, okay, we've got to get more feedback around this new functionality as we're building it. And we've gone through paper prototyping. We've got a fairly good idea what we're building for this particular feature because we've looked at that with customers. But in the real world with production data, how does it look? How does it react? How does it behave? And so we provided a feedback mechanism, an automated feedback mechanism, so someone in the product can actually provide feedback, get back into their flow of work, and get on with doing what they're doing. And of course, this was made available to employees across the company. So as they're using the product or as they're looking at the product, they can actually provide this feedback if they experience something or something's weird, and then they can get on with their job. What we did with that feedback is we collected it all and we sent it in a morning email. So 8 AM every morning, the engineers in the team, they would get this email. It's the first email that they get of the day. And it goes through all the things, all the bits of feedback. Love this, hate that, why didn't you do this, and so on and so forth. And when we started this, the feedback was infrequent. But as you start responding to a few of these people and replying to their feedback, maybe sharing your design decisions about why you didn't do something a certain way, or saying, hey, yeah, that's really good input, we'll incorporate that. Having that conversation is a great way to actually build trust with the customer. And so as you build trust with the customer, more and more people gave us feedback. And so we get to the point where we're very fortunate that as we rolled this out and extended it, in fact, we would get somewhere in the vicinity of 50 to 100 bits of feedback each day. And so we had to, I mean, there's only so much brain space that we've got, and we don't want to look at everything at once. So we said, okay, well, we're only going to look at the love. This is great. Like, what are people really loving about the product? And we're only going to look at the hates. What do people hate? And so we really, all the stuff in the middle, we took the loves, took the hates, and all the stuff in the middle we basically discarded. Not that we didn't keep it, but we didn't actually review it. And what we found is that having these loves and hates in the inbox every morning for an engineer to see, for the whole team to see, for the product manager to see, actually drove the team, and it really gave them a whole lot of momentum. It gave them a lot of drive, like, oh, they love that, that's great. Okay, well we've got another enhancement to that. We want to get it out. Let's get it out and let's go let Bob know. Well, they hate this. Why do they hate this? This is where we could go into a much deeper conversation, get them on Skype, get them on a Google Hangout, and understand, what was the issue. So if you look at dogfooding from the perspective of feedback, that feedback really drives momentum with the engineering team to roll out these features more frequently and increase that, the releases. Of course, automation is key to this. I'd hazard a guess that for those of you that aren't releasing at least once a month, it's because you have a fairly difficult release process. A lot of teams that I've worked with in the past, they would say, well, we build for a number of weeks and then we need a week or 2 weeks to get the software ready for release. And it's kind of like, well, okay, what do you do in these 2 weeks? Like, why do you need these 2 weeks to release? It's because they don't have the automation piece in practice. They don't have those automated tests, so that they know, again, another very fast feedback loop. On my branch that I'm coding on, I've actually got my tests, and if my tests start to fail, I know immediately. Right? The dogfooding is not the automated, it's the manual testing or the usage testing, but again, it's very fast feedback. But if you can get more automation in place, you can actually deploy more frequently. You can deploy to internal environments more frequently. One team in particular, we took this to the extreme. We said on any commit, so this is about raising that quality bar. We said on any commit to the feature branch, we are going to deploy that internally. And every employee internally is going to see that because it's going to be deployed instantly. The time from commit to deployment, it would run through tests. If the tests passed, then yes, it would be deployed. It was about 15 minutes. And so if we had a feature, an engineer would code review that feature, do an over-the-shoulder perhaps on a code review, or switching to pull requests. If that went and it was deployed, you can have employees playing with it in as little as 15 minutes. So you've got a really fast feedback loop to know what you're doing and how your product is actually reacting. You can't do that without automation. So back to Joe's point, you've got to invest in automation. Too many times I see product managers that go hard on features and they want features, 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 features because they think that's going to get them more in the market. But at the end of the day, they build up a ton of technical debt and it hits them down the road. They might get away with it for 6 months, they might get away with it for 18 months if they're really lucky. But at some point in time, the engineers are going to turn around and they're going to say, you know what, I can't put that feature in, or if I put that feature in, it's going to take me 3 weeks because I've got to refactor this big chunk of code. So have the automation in place, put it in place today to enable you to get greater velocity in the future. Finally, you've got visibility. You know, for those people in the organisation that aren't aware with what engineering is doing on a day-to-day basis, you can share that visibility. You've got the real data. Hey, let me give you a demo. Let me show you how it's working. Let me show you how we use it. And as a product manager, you can take that out to different parts of the organisation, or you could record a video. Actually, in terms of visibility, one of the greatest things to do for asynchronous communication is actually to record the video and share it on an internal wiki. We would do a lot of that because especially when you've got a remote team, you're not expecting them to be in a sprint demo at the end of their day or in their morning. And so we would do that offline. So we would record a demo, send it to them, they could review it and send back any comments they had after that. But really, the internal dogfooding is a way to raise the visibility of what the team is working on within the rest of the organisation. And so what does this all come down to? Well, it comes down to speed, right? We want, a measure for this is actually cycle time. Is anyone familiar with the concept of cycle time? Few people, okay. Cycle time as a metric is the amount of time from when an issue or a feature, a ticket, whatever you call it, when that goes from to do to in progress and we start working on it, and when it finally gets to done. Now, different teams will have a different definition of done. You know, our team, our definition of done is when it's actually in the hands of our customers and it's rolled out in production. Other teams, if you're shipping behind the firewall software, your definition of done might be the artifact's ready. And it's still that waterfall thing where you're waiting on marketing to ship it out. But you can get the speed here with dogfooding is to get to that definition of done quicker and minimize the cycle time. You want to get that cycle time down to a shorter period of time as possible for each of these individual issues or features. So dogfooding for me is a key aspect of Agile. We want to do these iterative loops. We want to do iterative development, take our customer feedback, action our customer feedback. The best way to get that customer feedback quickly, get your product out to your customers, it's a virtuous cycle if you actually use dogfooding. So with that, I'd like to turn it over and ask if anyone has any questions about dogfooding or cycle time or Agile. Please, Joe. Join me.
A question that I have and that I've run into in the past, even myself, is dogfooding is great if everybody in the organization uses the product. Twitter is very lucky in that I'm sure everybody that works at Twitter is very happy, avid users of Twitter. What are some tricks that you've used in the past? Like I know you worked at Atlassian last time, and I would guess that not everybody in the company used Bamboo. So like, how do you get people that are working on a product and they're pushing bits, but they may not be the target demographic to dog food, or do you just not bother?
Yeah, so your point about Twitter is correct, right? Like everyone at Twitter uses Twitter, so it's an easy problem to solve. Take it even further. One team I've worked with in the past, they actually do hearing aid implants. So there's a portion that's hardware, there's a portion that's embedded systems, and there's a portion that's software. Now, in that sort of environment, they have people that are hearing impaired that work for them, and they are essentially their dogfooding guinea pigs, right? Now, it's an interesting environment because they can dogfood the software up to a point. They rely heavily on automated testing for the embedded software, but when they actually integrate it together into the hardware piece, that's something that is very costly and very hard to dog food. And they have, I think they have a grand sum of 20 people in 1,000 that they can use. And obviously these people, because it's an implant, they're not going in for surgery every year. But they are, because they want the forefront of technology to improve their hearing, they are involved in that process. So they can tune the software and they will deploy the software to their hearing aid, the new embedded software. And so they can tune that. So that's the nth degree, but you're right, there are certainly environments where it is extremely hard to dog food. And in those environments, I'd be focusing on the visibility, you know, see, is there perhaps there's a lead customer that you could work with and ask if they want a dog food. I think that's yeah. Hello, yes.
I'm just curious, if you say cycle time is a great measure of speed, what sorts of things do you guys do to kind of get that low? Or and I'm curious, Joe, if you guys do the same or agree with or not.
As far as what?
Cycle time, like, do you guys? You said you guys don't really track time,
no,
so.
But I agree with what he's saying, and I think it's a great metric, and it's one I've been wanting to add. It's good to know it takes 2 days generally.
So cycle time's a little bit different from a due date. Cycle time's that measure of, if I have this, you can look at cycle time actually for this dog fooding process, like from when I check in to this branch, how long does it take that branch to automatically get merged into master? How long does it take master to get deployed to dog fooding? How long does it take dog fooding to get deployed to production for all of our customers? That's cycle time that's completely automated. And so you could measure that portion of the total workflow, and you could just try and optimize that. And around that, you know, well, there's a ton of tactical things that we've done. I mean, a great example, if anyone's familiar with Git, we use Git for our source code management. A checkout can take, for one repo in particular, a checkout can take many minutes. And so anything we can do to get that checkout time lower means we can run our tests faster. And so if we can shave 15 minutes off a test time or 20 minutes off a test time, then the engineer gets that feedback that much faster. If the tests pass, it gets deployed into our dogfooding environment that much faster. So again, focus on different sections. Ultimately, you want to actually minimize the cycle time across the whole workflow, but just focus on different sections first. There's a question down. Oh, I apologize. We're at time, so I've got to...